As we talk about the First Ministers and the importance of Canada-U.S. trade, one of the more invested industries in what will happen is the automotive sector. And that's because in Canada, the auto industry directly employs nearly 120,000 people. It also contributes about $12.5 billion to the national economy, and it is the second most exported product from Canada to the United States. So when U.S. officials talk tariffs, the Canadian auto industry listens. Well, joining us now is Flavio Volpe, president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. Flavio, good to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Michael.
Listen, as we see the First Ministers come together to strategize a way around Mr. Trump's tariff threat, I'm wondering what your association is doing right now to prepare for that kind of trade levy.
So we've seen this movie before in the Trump 1.0, and what we did to support the Team Canada effort was to inventory all the Canadian investments from Canadian auto parts suppliers in the U.S. What states, what component class, how many people are employed there, and how long they've been invested. And also shared all of the relationships that we have and the networks that we have in Washington and in other places like Lansing that would be helpful to both the federal government and, in this case, of course, the First Ministers. We spent a lot of time talking with Premier Ford and his team. All of our networks and our information is constantly refreshed and at the disposal of, the leads on engagement with our American partners.
And when you're doing that, what are you trying to prove? The very fact that the two markets, the two countries are so integrated that you can't really harm one without harming the other?
Yeah, well, we like to start with the first line of half of the cars made in Canada are made by American car manufacturers. And so you can't hurt Canada without hurting General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram. But then also, much more importantly, half of the parts that go into all the cars that are built here come from the U.S. and about 55% of the raw materials. But then different from the Canadian experience than maybe a Mexican one is Canadian auto parts companies have invested in 156 plants in 18 U.S. states and employ more than 45,000 Americans. So it's really not just two-way trade, but also two-way investment. We've been doing this all together for the last 120 years. And we're doing it to the benefit of the American intentions and the American interest. In automotive, the Canadian interest is completely overlapped with the American one. And so if there's ways to improve the relationship, then we're always ready to do it because 80% of the vehicles we make are sold into that market, and 62% of the vehicles that Canadians import come from American plants.
So do you actually think when Donald Trump talks about a 25% tariff, maybe even a 10% tariff, because that's really where he began, do you think that the automotive industry in Canada is actually protected from that?
Well, I'll remind your listeners that we talked about a 25% tariff on parts and cars in his first term using national security cover, the Section 232 tariffs. Ultimately, what we were successful in having his officials understand, and they're the ones who are at the table having to negotiate what benefit they might derive from this, is that the first companies that get hurt by a tariff are American parts suppliers, either subcomponent suppliers sitting in the U.S. or here in Canada making parts for American cars. And then the second party that gets hurt is American consumer. How could we do better together? Well, we convinced them in the first term that we're their best partners to compete with China, source of aluminum that they don't have. They don't have the smelter capacity for their Ford F-150s, never mind their military. But all of the critical minerals that go into batteries, that go into electric drive or hybrid or any of the applications where electrons are involved, we have the raw materials that they don't, that the Chinese do, and we have a common interest. We need the Americans to take that capacity, and they need us to process it.
So, of course, Mr. Trump made his tariff threat during the campaign. It upped it a couple of weeks ago when he put that social media post on his Truth Social account. I'm wondering if you've heard from American counterparts, what they're saying to you about this moment in time, whether they're expressing that you need to be calm about this or whether or not they, too, are concerned of what might be coming down the road.
Well, so many of them on both sides of the aisle are just generally amused by the way in which he speaks. And they hope that we don't take the bait. They do, though, understand that we understand that we should take the threat of tariff seriously, and that he looks at trade balance as the entire report card on the health of a relationship, and so that we've got some work to do to understand, for them to understand and for him to understand that trade imbalance today with Canada is because Canadian sources supply 60% of the oil and gas needs for the American market. And so it's not, hey, by the way, we're selling you finished goods that you could otherwise employ Americans to make. It's this is what you need to fuel your economy, and we have it, and we eagerly want to partner with you to sell it. And we were successful before. I think with patience, I think we can be successful again. But we should all be ready for a certain amount of pain. He did put national security tariffs on the aluminum that his own military needed in 2019, and that lasted 10 months. But what I remind Canadians, especially those of us who are having these conversations in the U.S., is that on January 21st, on day one for him, he's going to be picking fights with essentially the rest of the world. We're operating in a vacuum right now, as he's talking almost exclusively about us and Mexico with a China context. It's very difficult to be the president of the United States with all of the domestic responsibilities and have trade fights with everybody around the world and to be focused. And so don't do anything to exacerbate the moment. He is kidding. He is trolling us. But he has done that throughout his career to try to use whatever leverage he has in a supplier relationship that he has, and he sees Canada in this case as a supplier to the American consumer.
Well, we are watching what happens, of course, but always good to get your thoughts on this. Flavio Volpe, thank you for the time.
Always good to talk to you, Michael.
And you.